Today on Trucks, the guys have already given Big Blaze the proper stance and plenty of motivation with that 350 crate motor and bulletproof drivetrain. This week, they'll rework the interior before topping off their K5 Blazer. After all that's done, they'll turn back the hands of time with a 1915 GMC flatbed. That's all today on Trucks.
Welcome to this week's show. We're glad you're with us. Now, if you've followed the buildup of Project Big Blaze, then you've seen us take a very used, very worn 88 Blazer and literally resurrect it with a brand new drivetrain. So today, we're going to dive into the cab of our K5 Blazer and deal with the interior.
Anytime you're working on an older vehicle with a ton of miles on it, well, you can pretty much figure that the interior is trashed. And our old K5 is no exception. Now, not only is it well worn, but it smells like a pack of dogs has been living in here, which is not real pleasant on a hot summer day. So the first thing we're going to do is pull this cap off to give you a better idea of what we're going to do in here, and also to show you why Blazers are so cool. Now, all you have to do is pull off these perimeter bolts and then just lift the top off.
Now, we've obviously got a lot of stuff to replace inside our bow tie, but first and foremost is the carpet. And for the new stuff, we went to Cheyenne Pickup Parts and got their Blazer set that includes the front and rear sections, as well as covers for the wheel wells. Now, Cheyenne also has replacement pieces for the door panels and interior trim if you need those.
Now, with the top out of the way, it's time to get rid of these seats, the seat belts, this console, anything that's bolted to the floor. Now, on a project like this, you'll probably be tempted just to toss these seats in the garbage. Now, you can do that, but here's a couple things to think about. First of all, custom seats are expensive. You're going to have to spend some time making them to fit, and you're still going to be stuck with this old ugly blue thing in the back. On top of that, these old seats are not in bad shape. All the foam rubber's still good and solid, it's not broken down, so these are a good candidate to be recovered. So, we're going to show you how to make these things look like new and save yourself some money in the process.
Okay, with the seats out of the way, it's time to deal with these rear side panels, and they're just held in place with a bunch of finish screws. So once you have all those removed, you can carefully pull the panel out of the way. Now, we are going to restore our panels because they're still in good enough shape to reuse, not to mention they're almost impossible to find replacements for.
Now comes the moment of truth, and that's rolling up this old original carpet. Now, the good news here is you'll probably find some money under here. The bad news is you're going to find a lot of really nasty things you'd rather not know about. Now, make sure that you remove it all, the pad, the carpet, everything.
Now, with everything out, you definitely want to spend some time with the vacuum cleaning things up. And you also need to check for rust, especially around the doors and seams. Now, if you have any rust, you need to hit it with a good rust-prohibitive paint like this Miracle paint we got from Bill Hirsch, because that's going to prevent any future rust problems down the road.
Now, while the paint's drying on the floor, we'll go ahead and tear into these side panels and kick panels. Now, we're going to change the color of our interior to black, so these panels will need to be painted. Now, a big mistake that people make is they just grab a can of spray paint, shoot it on there, and then they're surprised when the paint doesn't stick. Now, you can make paint stick to plastic and vinyl, but you got to do it the right way. First of all, hit it with a good cleaner, take off the dirt and grime, then hit it with a pre-cleaner. This takes off the grease and the silicone, and then finally hit it with a good vinyl paint. If you follow these steps, you won't have any problem.
Stace already talked about making our seats look brand new, but before we can do that, we need to tackle these frames. So after cleaning everything up to get rid of all the dirt and grime, we're hitting them with some sandpaper to scuff things up before we tape them off and shoot them with some paint.
Finally, we're ready to start laying the carpet in. Now, first up, we'll glue these wheel well covers in place. Follow that with a sound deadener. Then the rear carpet piece. Finally, drop in the front section. Now, once you have it all in and centered up, all you have to do is cut the holes for your shifters and your various mounting bolts.
Now that our seat frames are dry, we can put the finishing touches on our old seats. Now the covers we're going to use are from Wet-A-Coy, and they're made of a neoprene rubber just like a wetsuit, which means they're going to be waterproof and extremely durable. And installation couldn't be any easier. All you do is slide them over the seat and strap them down, which also means you can pull them off and clean them up anytime you need to.
One thing's for sure, seeing all these pieces go back together makes all that disassembly work worthwhile. Check out how nice those newly painted panels look. Now, on these carpeted areas, you've got a couple of choices. If the carpet's in really good shape, well, you can just get some dye and dye it to the color that you want. Now, if the carpet's in really bad shape, you need to peel the carpet off and replace it. Now, our carpet's in really good shape, so we're going the dye route.
You know, since all the pieces we're putting back into Big Blaze are either new or refurbished, there was no way we were going to put these nasty old skid plates and trim back in. So what we're going to do is spend a little time with a good cleaner and polish to make everything look like new before we put them back where they belong.
Of course, the last step to this part of the project is bolting in these seats. And we think you'll agree that the transformation is pretty amazing. But that's not all we've got planned for this interior. Stay with us. We got more trucks after this.
Later in the show, we're going to do a little time travel with you. The year was 1915, and GMC called it the Model 41 flatbed. But before we take a look back at GM history, we're going to put the finishing touches on the interior of Big Blaze.
Welcome back to the shop. Now, if you're just joining us, we're right in the middle of doing interior rehash on Big Blaze. Now, the next step is this dash. Not only is it all cracked up, but it's also the wrong color. So we're going to tear it all apart, starting with this steering wheel and this old gauge cluster.
Now these door panels are also the wrong color, and they've definitely seen better days, but they still seem like they're in good enough shape to reuse. So we're going to pull them off along with all the hardware and handles, clean them up, and find out what we've got to work with here.
Now for the dash and the instrument bezel, we went to Cheyenne Pickup Parts, got one of their chrome bezels, and one of their fully padded replacement dashes. Now this isn't just some little cheap cover. This is a full dash that replaces your old one. It's definitely worth the money. Now there's a trick to getting these dashes out of these Chevys. First of all, take off the bezel, pop out these 4 screws, and then lift up on the dash and pop it out. That releases the clips in the back.
Some other stuff we grabbed at Cheyenne are these trim pieces as well as handles for the door panel. Now these things, along with some paint and cleanup work, are going to make our panels look brand new without draining our bank account.
Of course, before you put your new dash in, it's a good idea to paint all this lower metal to get everything to match. Then just slide the new dash in along with the new trim. Make sure that you hook up all your air conditioning vents. Then you can put on the bezel. Now remember, these things are plastic, so if you over tighten the screws, you'll break them.
With our door panels all painted up and looking good, all we have to do is pop them back on and we'll be ready to go. Now we also took the time to paint all the plastic trim inside the cab so everything will look new, and we're going to top it all off with these brand new sun visors we also got from Cheyenne.
Now one of the most important parts of an interior is, of course, the steering wheel. Now since you're going to have your hands wrapped around it most of the time, you might want to get yourself something kind of nice. So we went to Lucara, got one of these really cool leather-wrapped wheels and the adapter kit. Now installing one of these things is about as simple as just sliding the adapter on and then bolting the wheel to that.
Now that we have everything back together, there's no doubt we have a great looking interior. And since we did it ourselves on a reasonable budget, we won't have to face any of those nasty bills from the upholstery shop either.
With the interior taken care of on Big Blaze, there's still one area that needs some attention. That's this old beat up grill. So we made one last trip to Cheyenne Pickup Parts, got this really nice billet grill. Now that'll smooth everything up without overdoing it. Before you put your new grill in, now is a good time to replace your trim if it's bad. Now to install the grill, your original turn signal lights mount right here in the back. Then just carefully slide it into place Fasten it down with the supplied hardware.
Now the grill and the trim weren't the only things a little rough around the edges. The headlight buckets were pretty scarred up as well. So we gave Goodmark Industries a call and got the trim and the buckets to finish off the front end. Now once you have everything exactly where you want it, go ahead and pull the protective tape off the trim and you're done.
Well, that pretty much takes care of everything that we wanted to do to Big Blaze before we rolled it into the paint shop, except for one. Of course, to find out what that is, you're going to have to come back after the break. This thing looks good, doesn't it?
Awesome.
Up next on Trucks, we're going to top things off with a soft top on our K5 Blazer. Just can't get enough of trucks? Check us out online at truckstv.com.
Thanks for staying with us. Now, like we said before the break, there's one last area that we need to deal with before we roll Big Blaze into the paint shop. That's the issue of a top. Now, we could reuse the stock fiberglass top, but it's big and heavy, and where are you going to put it when you take it off? That's the biggest reason why most people never take their tops off the Blazer. Of course, that's the reason to have a Blazer, so you can take the top off. So the answer that we found is in the form of a soft top.
For our soft top, we went to Best Top and got one for the K5 Blazer. Now this top is made with a heavy waterproof fabric and also has plastic windows on the sides with heavy-duty zippers so you can open and close the top whenever you want to. Of course, it also comes with all the bows and hardware you'll need to install it.
Now, there's a couple of really important things that you need to remember anytime you're installing a convertible top. First, the fabric will contract when it's cold, so the warmer the top is, the easier it'll be to install. Second of all, you can see that we've got a lot of wrinkles in our top from shipping. Now don't worry about those. Once you install the top and it sits out in the sun, that'll all disappear in a couple days. Finally, these plastic windows are really easy to scratch. Don't ever just wipe them when they're dry. Always use a nice wet rag. Now, with all that said, let's get started.
The first thing you need to install are the bow mounting brackets. Now they mount right down to the body edge, 44 inches from the rear edge of the cab. So once you have your marks, go ahead and drill your holes and bolt them down with the supplied hardware.
Next up are the body snaps. Now for those, you'll start right in the center of the cab, measure in a ½ inch from the edge, and then drill and mount a snap. Now make sure that you use some silicone on these because that'll keep them from leaking. Then make a mark a ½ inch all the way around the cab. Then attach the center snap. Now, working from the center snap out, put on 6 more studs on each side, making sure you stay on your ½ inch line and making sure to pull the top tight.
When the top is up, it's supported by these metal bows, and they slide through these loops in the top, and the legs mount into the bracket using the hardware that comes with the kit. The rear bow mounts into the bracket the same way, but 6 snaps hold the cover in place.
Okay, here's where things get critical for a proper install. Now the 4 corners are the most important spots for a nice wrinkle-free fit. So while Mel pushes down on the top, I'm going to pull down and back on the sides, and then we can mark our spots for our snaps. Now once your rear corners are done, use the same technique to find the location for your front snaps. Then all you have to do is mount the other snaps to pull out the wrinkles.
One of the neatest things about this top is you can unzip the sides and roll it up without taking the entire top off. But to support the top while the sides are up, you have to mount this loop on the rear corner of the bed so you can run the strap for the top through it.
Now a few more tips that you should know about a soft top. Like Mel showed you, you can roll the sides up, but don't try to do that on a cold day because you can crack your windows. Also, if you happen to rip this material, you can fix it with a special iron-on patch. And finally, to take the top down, all you have to do is unsnap it, everything folds back.
Well, there you have it. If you want to cover up your interior, Best Top will not only help you do it in style, but if you install it right, you don't ever have to worry about it leaking on you either.
Now today's tip has to do with replacing your drive shaft after you've put in new U-joints. Now, most U-joints are held in place by these little U-bolts. And since most people think that tighter is better, they really crank these down. Now the problem is if you do that, you can crush this bearing cap, which squashes down on the needle bearings and of course destroys your U-joint. Now only 20 to 30 foot-pounds is what you need, and since most torque wrenches don't fit in these tight little areas, I like to use a short-handled wrench to keep from over-tightening them.
Welcome back to Trucks, everybody. You know, now that we're into the new millennium, there's a lot of things we tend to take for granted. Things like the state-of-the-art trucks you see at your local dealership, available with all the comforts of home.
But if you'd have walked into a dealership in, say, 1915, this is what you would have seen. A 1915 GMC flatbed truck, which really has more in common with a stagecoach than with a modern truck. So follow along as we take you on a ride to show you how much has changed over the years.
Now the first thing that catches your eye are the wheels. Yep, those are wooden spoke wheels, the same thing you'd see on a lot of horse-drawn wagons of the era. The tires are also unique due to the fact they're one solid piece of rubber. Keep in mind, back in '15, air-filled tires weren't the norm yet.
Up in the cab, the seat looks like it came right off of a Wells Fargo stagecoach. And safety obviously wasn't much of an issue because the gas tank is right below it. Now, doors were not an option because this was a working man's truck. And air conditioning, well, that came from 14 miles an hour and no windshield. Power steering, well, that depended on how much power you had in your biceps. An airbag was a term that was usually reserved for your mother-in-law back then.
Electrical systems were pretty much non-existent in 1915, so the headlights were nothing more than kerosene lamps hung on each side of the cowl. Of course, there were no gauges except a single oil pressure dial, and since there was no dash for a glove box, dual storage compartments were located in the seat pedestal.
Now, starting one of these old boys didn't take a key. It had its own unique process, which could be a little dangerous. Now, you had to be really careful when you cranked one of these things because the engine could kick back and break your arm. So what you did was engage it about 7 o'clock, pull it up hard to 12, and keep doing that until it started. Now, once the engine's running, you're ready to go, all 40 horses.
Of course, the whole purpose for a truck is to haul stuff, and this vehicle did that with an all-wooden flatbed that kept the cargo from rolling off with removable side stakes. Underneath the bed are familiar things like a drive shaft, axle, as well as leaf springs, but you can't help but notice it was mechanical brakes and no shock absorbers in 1915.
Well, there's no question our technology has come a long way since the early 1900s. Just check out this vintage photo of the Rapid Street Assembly Plant where less than 6,000 of these trucks were built. But the real treat is the honor of having a perfectly preserved piece of GM history take us back to a time when trucks and horses shared the road.
And now truck gear, parts, tools, and equipment for pickups and sport utilities.
You know, there's a whole bunch of ways to keep people from breaking into your truck and stealing it. Of course, one way is an alarm, but another is called the Jimmy Jammer from Redline Technical Group. Now, it's nothing more than a pair of thick metal plates with some hardware that mount right inside your door to prevent any kind of forced entry through the door handle, including a Slim Jim. Installation only takes about 30 minutes, and it only costs about 30 bucks, which is a lot better than paying the deductible on your insurance to have your truck repaired or even replaced.
Now, when it comes to paint and body work, there's a lot of tricks and techniques out there that a lot of people never hear about. Now, wouldn't it be nice to have access to that? Well, now you can with these tapes in the Paintucation series. Now, they've got everything from rust repair to paint techniques to even color sanding and buffing. Now, you can get them all in a set, or you can just buy them individually, and Eastwood is the place to get them.
Now, if you're driving a Ford truck with a Power Stroke diesel, you may not realize that its stock air intake system is very restrictive. So Western Diesel came up with a solution to this problem with their Turbo Ram Air that they claim will give you a 13% power increase by doubling the amount of air flowing into your engine. Now, the Turbo Ram Air replaces your entire stock system and installs with just simple hand tools. Put the power in your Power Stroke with Western Diesel for about 500 bucks. That's going to do it for Truck Gear. Here's a preview of next week's show.
The guys show you how to put the power in a power stroke when they take you step by step through the installation of an intake upgrade on their diesel F250. The Ford theme continues when they roll a 1948 F6 into the truck shop for a closer look. And finally, Stacy gives you some helpful tips on repairing rusty panels. That's all next week on Trucks.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. We appreciate you hanging out with us.
Yeah, we got more trucks for you next week. Hold on.
Let's go.
Where's the Beverly Hillbillies music?
Oh, man. Can't this thing go any faster?
Trucks is an RTM production.